The day her father's casket was lowered into the hard Montana earth, Penelope Keller discovered just how quickly a life could unravel. The banker's words still echoed in her ears as she stood alone at the graveside, the bitter November wind cutting through her threadbare coat. "I'm afraid your father left nothing but debts, Miss Keller. The house must be sold." Penelope stared at the modest headstone, her gloved fingers clutching a single withered rose. At 22, she'd expected to be teaching at the schoolhouse by now, perhaps even courting one of the town's eligible young men. Instead, she was utterly alone in Riverton, Montana, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a mountain of her father's gambling debts. "Miss Keller," the Reverend approached cautiously, "I'm afraid we must close the cemetery gates soon. Is there someone who can escort you home?" She shook her head, her auburn hair partially escaping the tight bun at the nape of her neck. "No, Reverend Miller, but I'll be fine. Thank you for your kindness today." As the Reverend departed, Penelope took one final look at her father's grave. Thomas Keller had been a loving father but a terrible businessman. After her mother died of consumption 5 years ago, he'd started drinking and gambling, always believing the next hand would be the one to restore their fortunes. The year was 1884, and Penelope Keller was utterly, completely alone. The walk back to what had once been her home felt interminable. Riverton had sprung up alongside the Missouri River as a trading post in the 1850s, and now, 30 years later, it had grown into a respectable if small frontier town. The main street boasted a general store, a bank, 2 saloons, a hotel, and a handful of other businesses. People nodded sympathetically as she passed, but no one stopped to offer help. Her father's reputation had seen to that. When she reached the modest 2-story house that had been her home for her entire life, Penelope was surprised to find Mr. Henderson, the town banker, waiting on the porch. "Miss Keller," he said, removing his hat. "I apologize for disturbing you on such a difficult day, but I'm afraid there's a matter of some urgency." "I understand the house must be sold, Mr. Henderson," she said wearily. "I just need a few days to gather my belongings." The banker looked uncomfortable. "That's just it, Miss Keller. I'm afraid we have a buyer already. The Fletcher cattle operation has been looking to establish an office in town, and they've made an offer." "When must I leave?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll be taking possession tomorrow afternoon." Penelope felt her knees weaken. "Tomorrow, but that's impossible. Where am I to go?" Henderson shuffled his feet. "Mrs. Beaumont at the boarding house might take you in temporarily, or perhaps Reverend Miller's wife could." "No," Penelope said firmly. "I won't accept charity. I'll find my own way." That night, she packed her mother's silver hairbrush, a few dresses, and the small collection of books she treasured. Everything else would have to be left behind. She counted her meager savings, barely enough for a week at the boarding house. After that, she had no idea what would become of her. Morning came too quickly. Penelope had barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities, none of them promising. She could try to find work as a seamstress, though Mrs. Davis already fulfilled that role in town. The saloon was always hiring girls, but her father would roll over in his fresh grave if she took such a position. She was placing the last of her belongings in a carpet bag when a knock came at the door. Expecting Mr. Henderson, she was surprised to find a tall, broad-shouldered man standing on her porch. His face was weathered from the sun, his eyes a startling shade of blue against his tanned skin. He wore a black Stetson, dusty from the trail, and a sheepskin coat that had seen better days. "Miss Keller?" he asked, removing his hat to reveal sandy blonde hair. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "My name is Finn O'Connor. I believe I've purchased your house." Penelope stiffened. Yes, Mr. O'Connor, I was just preparing to leave. The man looked uncomfortable. May I come in for a moment? I'd like to discuss something with you. Against her better judgment, Penelope stepped aside to let him enter. She had nothing to lose, after all. Finn O'Connor surveyed the modest sitting room, taking in the faded wallpaper and well-worn furniture. I understand your father passed recently. My condolences. Thank you, she replied stiffly. Mr. Henderson said you represent the Fletcher cattle operation. Finn cleared his throat. Actually, I am the Fletcher operation now. Joshua Fletcher was my uncle. He passed last spring and left me his ranch and holdings. I've been expanding since then. I see, and you need an office in town, among other things. He studied her for a moment. Miss Keller, I've heard about your situation, the debts your father left behind. Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks. My father's financial matters are none of your concern, Mr. O'Connor. Perhaps not, he agreed, but I have a proposition for you. She raised an eyebrow, instantly suspicious. Men with propositions were seldom thinking of a woman's best interests. I need someone to manage my accounts and correspondence, he continued. Someone literate and with a head for figures. The ranch is growing and I can't keep track of everything myself anymore. You're offering me employment, of sorts. He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable for a man of his stature. The thing is, Miss Keller, the ranch is 15 miles outside of town, not a suitable place for an unmarried lady to reside. Penelope's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting? An arrangement, he said quickly. A marriage of convenience. You'd have a home, security, and a position managing the ranch accounts, and I'd have a wife to cook and clean and warm your bed, she finished for him, her voice icy. Finn's expression hardened. I have a housekeeper who cooks and cleans just fine, Miss Keller. And as for the rest, I'm proposing a business arrangement, not demanding wifely duties. Why would you marry a complete stranger? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I need help running the business side of the ranch, and this town talks. If I brought an unmarried woman to live at the ranch, your reputation would be ruined. I'm offering you protection, both financial and social. Penelope stared at him, trying to discern his true motives. Why me specifically? Surely there are other women in town who could manage your books. None with your education, he replied. Your father made sure everyone knew his daughter had studied with private tutors and could speak French and do complex mathematics. And none who need a solution quite as desperately as you do. His bluntness stung, but she couldn't deny the truth of his words. Still, the idea was preposterous. Mr. O'Connor, while I appreciate your unusual offer, I cannot possibly— You'll have your own bedroom, he interrupted. Your own space. I won't make any demands that would compromise your dignity. You'll manage the books, help with correspondence, and in return you'll share my fortune and my name. He paused. It's more than a fair arrangement, Miss Keller. Penelope turned away, her mind racing. What choice did she truly have? The boarding house would only be temporary. Teaching positions were scarce, and without references or experience, her prospects were grim. I need time to consider, she said finally. I'm afraid time is the one thing you don't have, he replied, not unkindly. I'll be heading back to the ranch this afternoon. If you accept my offer, you'll come with me. If not— He left the sentence unfinished. Penelope took a deep breath. May I ask one question, Mr. O'Connor? Of course. Why are you unmarried? A successful rancher should have his pick of eligible ladies. A shadow crossed his face. I was engaged once. She decided the life of a rancher's wife wasn't for her after all. His voice was neutral, but Penelope detected an old wound there. I see. Do we have an agreement, Miss Keller? Penelope looked around the house where she'd grown up, soon to belong to this stranger regardless of her decision. What would her father advise, or her practical-minded mother? The answer came to her with surprising clarity: they would want her to survive. "Yes, Mr. O'Connor. We have an agreement." "Good," he said, his expression softening slightly. "Pack what matters to you. We'll be married by Judge Wilson before we leave town." And just like that, Penelope Keller agreed to marry a man she'd known for less than an hour. The ceremony was brief and impersonal. Judge Wilson, a bald man with spectacles perched on his bulbous nose, recited the vows with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Penelope wore her best dress, a navy blue affair that had belonged to her mother, and Finn had changed into a clean shirt and coat. Mrs. Wilson and her daughter served as witnesses, both women eyeing Penelope with undisguised curiosity. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Wilson declared. "You may kiss the bride." Finn hesitated, then leaned forward and placed a chaste kiss on Penelope's cheek. It was over in an instant, but she felt a strange flutter in her chest at the contact. "Congratulations, Mrs. O'Connor," the judge said, handing her the marriage certificate. Mrs. O'Connor. The name felt foreign, like a dress that didn't quite fit. They left town in Finn's wagon, Penelope's meager possessions stored in the back. As they passed the town limits, she felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. Riverton held painful memories, but at least it was familiar. Now she was heading into the unknown with a man who was, for all intents and purposes, still a stranger. "The ranch is about 3 hours' ride from town," Finn said, breaking the silence that had stretched between them since leaving the judge's office. "We'll arrive before dark. How large is it?" she asked, trying to imagine her new home. 5,000 acres, give or take, most of it grazing land. We run about 2,000 head of cattle, and I've started breeding horses as well. Penelope was impressed despite herself. "That's quite an operation." "My uncle built it from nothing," Finn said, a note of pride in his voice. "When he died, he left it to me. I'd been working for him since I was 16. "Where were you before that?" he hesitated. "Chicago. My parents died in the fire of '71. Joshua was my mother's brother. He brought me west afterward." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "About your parents." Finn nodded but didn't elaborate further. Instead, he pointed to a distant ridge. "That's the northern boundary of the ranch. Once we cross it, we'll be on Fletcher land." The landscape was rugged but beautiful. Rolling hills covered with golden grasses swayed in the autumn breeze. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains loomed, their peaks already dusted with snow. It was wild country, untamed and vast in a way that made Penelope feel both insignificant and somehow free. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "It is," he agreed. "Harsh sometimes, but beautiful." They crossed a small stream and followed a well-worn trail through a stand of cottonwoods. As they emerged from the trees, Penelope caught her first glimpse of the ranch. A large 2-story house stood on a gentle rise, surrounded by various outbuildings: a barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and what appeared to be a forge. Fenced corrals held horses, and in the distance, she could see cattle grazing on the hillsides. "Welcome to the Rocking F," Finn said as they approached. As they drew closer, Penelope noticed a woman emerge from the house. She was tall and angular, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe bun. "That's Mrs. Whittaker, the housekeeper," Finn explained. "She's been with the ranch since my uncle's time. She can be formidable, but she's loyal and efficient." "Does she know about our arrangement?" Penelope asked nervously. "She knows I went to town to buy a house and return with a wife," he replied. "The details are between us." The wagon pulled up in front of the house, and Finn hopped down, coming around to offer Penelope his hand. As she descended, she was acutely aware of Mrs. Whittaker's scrutinizing gaze. Mrs. Whittaker, this is Penelope, Finn said. My wife. The housekeeper's eyebrows rose slightly. Madam, she said with a curt nod, I've prepared the master bedroom for you both. Penelope felt her cheeks flush, and beside her, Finn cleared his throat. Actually, Mrs. Whittaker, prepare the blue room for Mrs. O'Connor as well. She'll need her own space for reading and correspondence. The housekeeper's expression remained neutral, but Penelope detected a flicker of something surprise or perhaps disapproval in her eyes. As you wish. Dinner will be ready in an hour. I'll show Mrs. O'Connor to her rooms. Finn nodded. I need to check on a sick calf. I'll be back for dinner. As he strode toward the barn, Penelope was left alone with the intimidating housekeeper. Mrs. Whittaker turned without a word and entered the house, clearly expecting Penelope to follow. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined. The floors were polished hardwood, the furniture sturdy but well crafted. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, with comfortable-looking chairs arranged before it. The walls were adorned with a few paintings, landscapes mostly, and a gun rack held several rifles. This way, Mrs. Whittaker said, leading Penelope up a wide staircase. The upper floor contained several bedrooms. Mrs. Whittaker opened a door at the end of the hall, revealing a spacious room with a large four-poster bed. The master bedroom, she explained. And through here, she opened a connecting door, is the blue room, which I'll prepare for your personal use. The smaller room was painted a soft blue with a window overlooking the mountains. It contained a writing desk, a small settee, and bookshelves along one wall. Thank you, Mrs. Whittaker, Penelope said. It's lovely. The housekeeper studied her for a moment. The master married in haste, she observed. I've known him since he was a boy. He doesn't make decisions lightly. Penelope wasn't sure how to respond. Our arrangement is somewhat unconventional. Most things are out here, the older woman replied cryptically. I'll leave you to settle in. Dinner is at 6 sharp. After Mrs. Whittaker departed, Penelope sank onto the bed, the enormity of what she'd done finally hitting her. She was married to a stranger, living on a remote ranch with no idea what the future held. Yet despite the uncertainty, she felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about creditors or losing her home. She had a roof over her head and a purpose, managing the ranch accounts. It was more than she'd had that morning. Penelope unpacked her few belongings, arranging them carefully in the large wardrobe that dominated one wall of the bedroom. Her dresses looked pitiful hanging there, the empty space emphasizing how little she possessed. She placed her mother's silver hairbrush on the dressing table and her books on a shelf in the blue room. At precisely 6 o'clock, she made her way downstairs, following the aroma of roasting meat to the dining room. Finn was already seated at the head of the table, freshly washed and changed. He stood as she entered. Penelope, he said, pulling out a chair for her. I hope you're settling in. Yes, thank you, she replied, taking her seat. The house is lovely. It was my uncle's pride. He built it himself, piece by piece, as the ranch prospered. Mrs. Whittaker appeared with a large platter of roast beef, followed by a young Mexican woman carrying side dishes of potatoes and green beans. This is Alina, Finn explained. She helps Mrs. Whittaker in the kitchen and with household chores. Alina smiled shyly at Penelope. Welcome, Senora. Thank you, Alina. The meal was delicious, far better than anything Penelope had eaten in months. As they ate, Finn outlined the workings of the ranch. We have 8 hands who work year-round, plus extra help during roundup and branding. Most of them sleep in the bunkhouse, but my foreman, Jack Ryan, has a small cabin near the creek. He's been with the ranch even longer than I have. And what will my duties be? Penelope asked. The account books are in a terrible state, Finn admitted. My uncle was an excellent cattleman but had no head for figures. I've tried to maintain them, but with the expansion of the herd and the horse breeding operation, I'm falling behind. I need to know how much we're spending, what we're earning, and where we stand financially. I see. When would you like me to begin? Whenever you're ready. The office is off the main room downstairs. All the books and correspondence are there. They finished the meal with apple pie and coffee, the conversation remaining safely on the topic of ranch business. When they'd finished, Finn excused himself. I need to check on that calf one more time before turning in, he said. Make yourself at home. This is your house now, too. After he'd gone, Penelope explored the downstairs. The office was a cozy room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk. Account ledgers were stacked haphazardly alongside correspondence and invoices. It would take time to sort through everything, but the task didn't intimidate her. If anything, she welcomed the challenge. She was examining the bookshelves in the main room when Finn returned. Night had fallen completely and he looked tired. "The calf?" she inquired, looking better. "The new medicine from Denver seems to be working." He hesitated. "It's getting late." Penelope felt a flutter of anxiety. Despite his assurances about their arrangement, the reality of sharing a bedroom, even just for appearances, was daunting. "I can sleep in the blue room," she suggested. Finn shook his head. "Mrs. Whitaker would notice. For now, at least, we should maintain appearances." He paused. "I won't." "That is, I meant what I said. This is a business arrangement. I understand." They ascended the stairs together, an awkward silence between them. In the bedroom, Penelope collected her nightgown and robe. "I'll change in the blue room," she said. When she returned, Finn had changed into a nightshirt and was adjusting a pillow and blanket on the small settee in the corner of the room. "You can't sleep there," she protested. "It's far too small for you." "I've slept in worse places," he assured her. "The bed is yours." Penelope felt a mixture of relief and something else, disappointment, perhaps. The thought startled her. "If you're certain—" "I am. Good night, Penelope." "Good night, Finn." She climbed into the large bed, extinguished the lamp, and lay in the darkness, listening to Finn's steady breathing from across the room. It was strange to think that morning she had woken up alone in her childhood home, and now she was married and living on a cattle ranch miles from town. Life could change in an instant, she reflected. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Days at the Rocking F settled into a routine. Penelope spent her mornings organizing the ranch accounts, a task that proved even more daunting than she'd anticipated. Joshua Fletcher had indeed been careless with his bookkeeping, and it took her nearly a week just to sort through the invoices and receipts. Finn was often gone from dawn until dusk, overseeing the ranch operations. He returned each evening tired but satisfied, and they would share dinner, discussing the progress of her accounting work and the day's events on the ranch. At night, he continued to sleep on the settee, despite Penelope's repeated offers to take turns or to risk misses. Whitaker's disapproval by having him sleep elsewhere. There was something touchingly stubborn about his insistence on this point of honor. As November deepened toward winter, Penelope began to feel more at home on the ranch. Alina taught her to make tortillas in the kitchen, and even Mrs. Whitaker warmed slightly, offering grudging approval of Penelope's efforts to bring order to the household accounts. The master's uncle was a good man but hopeless with money, she confided one afternoon as they shelled peas together. "Nearly lost the ranch once because he couldn't account for where the profits were going." "How did he save it?" Penelope asked. That was when Finn arrived, just 16, skinny as a rail but sharp as a tack with figures. He straightened things out, convinced the bank to extend the loans. Mrs. Whitaker's face softened. "He's a good man, Mrs. O'Connor, like his uncle but with a better head on his shoulders." Penelope thought about this conversation later as she worked in the office, meticulously recording the cost of winter feed against the projected spring cattle sales. Finn had saved the ranch once before. No wonder he was so concerned about keeping the accounts in order. She was still working when Finn returned from checking fence lines in the north pasture. He stomped the snow from his boots in the entryway before joining her in the office. His face reddened from the cold. "Making progress?" he asked, warming his hands by the fire. "Yes, actually. I think I've untangled the feed costs from last winter, and I've started projecting what we'll need for this year." She hesitated. "Finn, did you know your uncle was significantly undercounting the herd?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "According to these records, he reported 1,600 head to the tax assessor last year, but your tally from spring roundup shows over 2,000. "That old scoundrel," Finn muttered, but there was affection in his voice. "Always trying to save a dollar. We'll need to adjust the figures for this year." "Already done," she said, showing him the corrected ledger. "I've also created a new system for tracking breeding stock separately from market animals. It should make it easier to see where our profits are coming from." Finn studied the neat columns of figures, impressed. "This is excellent work, Penelope. Better than I'd hoped for, honestly." She felt a flush of pride at his praise. "Thank you. I've always had a knack for organization." "A valuable skill on a ranch," he said, his blue eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Penelope felt a flutter in her stomach and quickly looked back at the ledger. These unexpected moments of connection with Finn were becoming more frequent: a shared laugh over dinner, a lingering glance, the brush of his hand against hers when passing the coffee. Each time she felt the same flutter, followed by confusion. Theirs was a business arrangement, she reminded herself, nothing more. Yet as the weeks passed, she found herself looking forward to his return each evening, enjoying their conversations that increasingly strayed from ranch business to more personal topics. She learned that he enjoyed reading history books, had traveled to San Francisco once and found it too crowded, and harbored a secret fondness for Mrs. Whitaker's apple dumplings. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Riverton, her love of French poetry, and her dream of seeing the ocean someday. "The Pacific is something to behold," Finn told her one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. "When you stand on the shore and look out, you can't see where the water ends and the sky begins. Makes a man feel small." "I'd like to feel that," she admitted. "To see something so vast it makes my problems seem insignificant." He studied her in the firelight. "Is that how you feel about the ranch, that it makes your problems from town seem smaller?" "Yes," she said thoughtfully, "though not just because of the land, because of the purpose I've found here." She hesitated. "Thank you for that, for giving me a chance when no one else would." "You've more than earned your keep," he assured her. "The ranch books haven't been this organized since, well, ever, still. It was a risk bringing a stranger into your home, especially as a wife." Something flickered in his eyes. "Not as much of a risk as you might think." Before she could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by Mrs. Whitaker, who needed instructions about a delivery of supplies expected from town. The first major snowstorm hit in early December, blanketing the ranch in nearly 2 feet of snow. The ranch hands worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle could reach feed and water, and Finn was gone for long hours, often returning after dark, exhausted and chilled to the bone. One such night, Penelope was waiting with hot coffee and a bowl of stew when he stumbled in, his coat crusted with ice. "You're frozen through," she scolded, helping him remove his coat. Come sit by the fire before you catch your death." He didn't protest as she guided him to the chair closest to the hearth. His hands were so cold they could barely hold the coffee mug, so Penelope wrapped her own hands around his, warming them. "3 calves were trapped in a ravine," he explained wearily. "Ryan and I managed to get them out, but it was touch and go for a while." "Did they survive?" He nodded. "They're in the barn with their mothers. They'll be fine." He looked down at their joined hands. "Thank you for the coffee and this." Penelope realized she was still holding his hands and quickly withdrew hers. "You should eat while it's hot," she said, passing him the stew. As he ate, she noticed he was shivering despite the roaring fire. "You need a hot bath and dry clothes," she decided. "I'll ask Alina to heat water. Don't bother her this late, I'll be fine." "Nonsense. You're no good to anyone if you fall ill." She stood. "Finish your stew. I'll see to the bath." Despite his protests, she arranged for a hot bath to be prepared in the small room off the kitchen used for that purpose. When it was ready, she collected a fresh set of clothes from their bedroom and brought them down. "Everything's ready," she told him. "Don't rush. Get properly warm." Finn looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You're a good wife, Penelope, even in a marriage like ours." The words warmed her more than they should have. "It's practical, not kindness. The ranch needs you healthy." His smile suggested he didn't believe her, but he went without further argument. Later, as they prepared for bed, Penelope noticed Finn wince as he arranged his blankets on the settee. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing. Just a bit sore from hauling those calves." She frowned. "The settee is too small for you on a good day. You'll be crippled by morning if you sleep there tonight." "I'll manage." "Don't be ridiculous," she said firmly. "The bed is plenty large enough for both of us. We can put pillows between us if it makes you more comfortable." He looked at her in surprise. "Penelope, I gave you my word, and I'm not suggesting you break it," she interrupted. "I'm suggesting we be practical. You need proper rest to recover, and that settee is not going to provide it." Finn hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. "I trust you," she added softly. "You've been nothing but honorable these past weeks." Finally, he nodded. "If you're certain." "I am." They arranged themselves carefully on opposite sides of the large bed, a row of pillows forming a barrier between them. Penelope extinguished the lamp and lay in the darkness, acutely aware of Finn's presence despite the pillows separating them. "Good night, Finn," she whispered. "Good night, Penelope," he replied, his voice low in the darkness. Sleep came slowly that night, her mind too full of confusing thoughts and feelings. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of standing by an endless ocean, Finn's hand warm in hers as they gazed at the horizon. Morning brought fresh challenges. The snow had drifted against the barn doors, and the ranch hands had to dig their way out to reach the animals. Finn was gone before Penelope awoke, the impression of his head still visible on the pillow beside hers. The storm continued for 3 days, during which the ranch operated in a state of constant vigilance. Cattle needed to be checked, feed distributed, and water holes kept from freezing over. Penelope found herself drawn into the effort, preparing hot meals for the men when they came in from the cold and helping Alina mend torn gloves and scarves. Each night, Finn returned exhausted, and each night he slept beside her in the bed, the wall of pillows between them gradually diminishing as their discomfort with the arrangement faded. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, revealing a transformed landscape. The ranch was buried in snow, with only the roofs of the lower outbuildings visible. The sky was a brilliant blue, the air so clear and cold it hurt to breathe. Penelope stood on the porch, wrapped in her coat and shawl, marveling at the beauty of it. "It's like a painting," she said when Finn joined her. Beautiful but dangerous, he replied. We lost 5 head that we know of. Could have been much worse. She turned to look at him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the new lines of fatigue around his mouth. You need rest, Finn. You've barely slept in days. There's too much to do. Ryan thinks he saw wolf tracks near the east pasture. We need to check the herd there. The wolves will still be there in a few hours, she insisted, taking his arm. Come inside. Eat something hot and take a proper rest before you collapse. To her surprise, he allowed himself to be led back inside. Mrs. Whittaker served them hot stew and fresh bread, and Finn ate mechanically, his exhaustion evident in every movement. Now, upstairs, Penelope commanded when he'd finished. At least 2 hours of sleep. I'll wake you if there's any emergency. Too tired to argue, Finn trudged upstairs, Penelope following to ensure he actually went to bed. In their room, he sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, struggling to remove his boots. Without thinking, Penelope knelt and helped him, pulling the boots from his feet and setting them aside. When she looked up, Finn was watching her with an unreadable expression. You don't have to do that, he said softly. I know, she straightened, but I want to help. He caught her hand as she turned to leave. Penelope. She looked back at him, something in his voice making her heart race. Thank you, he said simply, but his eyes conveyed much more. She squeezed his hand. Rest now, I'll wake you in a couple of hours. But she let him sleep for 4, knowing how desperately he needed it. When he finally came downstairs, he looked better, still tired, but no longer on the verge of collapse. You should have woken me, he said, finding her in the kitchen helping Alina prepare dinner. You needed the rest, she replied. Besides, Jack Ryan came by and said they've checked the east pasture. No sign of wolves or injured cattle. Finn raised an eyebrow. You're becoming quite the rancher's wife. The words sent an unexpected thrill through her. Was that what she was becoming? Not just a bookkeeper with a convenient marriage certificate, but a true partner in this enterprise. That night, for the first time since their marriage, they went to bed at the same time, the barrier of pillows reduced to a single one placed casually between them. As she drifted off to sleep, Penelope found herself wondering what it would be like to close the distance between them, to feel Finn's arms around her not out of necessity or arrangement, but out of desire. The thought should have shocked her, but instead, it felt like the most natural progression in the world. December gave way to January, and the frigid grip of winter tightened around the rocking F. The days were short, the nights long and bitterly cold. Yet inside the ranch house, there was warmth not just from the crackling fires in the hearths, but from the growing connection between Penelope and Finn. Their evenings had evolved into a cherished ritual. After dinner, they would retire to the main room where Finn would build up the fire while Penelope selected a book from the shelves. Sometimes, she would read aloud passages from Dickens or Twain while Finn listened, his blue eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Other times, they would simply talk, sharing thoughts and memories they had never voiced to another soul. My father wasn't always a gambler, Penelope confided one snowy evening. Before my mother died, he was cautious with money, always saving for the future. Her illness changed him. It was as if her death took away his reason for planning ahead. Finn nodded thoughtfully. Grief can transform a person. After my parents died, I was angry at the world. If my uncle hadn't been so patient with me, I might have ended up on a very different path. What was he like, your uncle? A smile touched Finn's lips. Larger than life. He could outwork men half his age, and he never asked anyone to do something he wasn't willing to do himself. But he was gentle, too, in his way. The first time I rode out with him to check the herd, a mother cow charged us, protecting her calf. Instead of shooting her, which would have been his right, he just laughed and said, "That's a good mama. She's just doing her job. He sounds wonderful, he was. He gave me a home when I had nothing, a purpose. Finn's eyes met hers. I wanted to do the same for you. The simple honesty of his words touched Penelope deeply. You have, she said softly, more than you know. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement that their arrangement had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. The next day, Penelope was reviewing the breeding records when she discovered a discrepancy. According to the books, the ranch had purchased 10 Hereford bulls 2 years prior, but only 8 were accounted for in the current inventory. She waited until dinner to bring it up, not wanting to bother Finn while he was working. As Mrs. Whittaker served roast venison, a welcome change from the usual beef, Penelope mentioned her finding. 2 missing bulls, Finn frowned. That's odd. Bulls are too valuable to not be accounted for. Could they have died and not been recorded? Possible, but unlikely. Ryan is meticulous about recording animal losses. He set down his fork. I'll speak to him tomorrow, see if he remembers anything. The following afternoon, Penelope was working in the office when Finn burst in, his expression thunderous. The bulls were stolen, he announced without preamble. Ryan just confirmed it. He thought my uncle had handled the matter privately, but apparently he never reported it. Stolen? By whom? The Walsh outfit, most likely. They run a small spread about 20 miles south of here. Ryan says they've had trouble with them before, missing cattle, cut fences. My uncle didn't want to escalate things, so he kept quiet. Penelope set aside her ledger. What will you do? Pay them a visit. Let them know the new owner of the Rocking F isn't as forgiving as the old one. Alarm flared in Penelope's chest. Alone? That sounds dangerous. Ryan and 2 of the hands will come with me. We'll be fine. He must have seen the worry in her eyes because his tone softened. It's just a warning, Penelope, to let them know I'm aware of what happened and won't tolerate it going forward. She wasn't convinced, but she knew arguing would be futile. The code of the West was clear: a man protected what was his. When will you go? Tomorrow, first light. With luck, we'll be back by evening. That night, Penelope found it hard to sleep. Finn lay beside her, his breathing even, apparently unconcerned about the confrontation ahead. She watched his profile in the dim moonlight filtering through the window, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows even in sleep. The thought of him riding into danger made her heart constrict painfully. It was then, in the quiet darkness of their shared bedroom, that Penelope admitted to herself what she had been avoiding for weeks. She had fallen in love with her husband. What had begun as a marriage of convenience had become, for her at least, something real and precious. Morning came too soon. Finn dressed quietly, trying not to wake her, but Penelope had barely slept. Be careful, she said as he strapped on his gun belt, something she'd rarely seen him wear around the ranch. He turned, surprised to find her awake. I will, don't worry. How can I not? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Finn crossed to the bed and, after a moment's hesitation, sat beside her. I promise I'll be careful. This isn't about revenge, just setting boundaries. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. To her surprise, Finn reached out and gently touched her cheek. I'll come back to you, he said softly, his eyes holding hers. You have my word. Then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the hallway, leaving Penelope with the lingering warmth of his touch on her skin and the echo of a promise that meant more than he could know. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Penelope tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept conjuring images of Finn confronting angry men with guns. By afternoon, she had abandoned any pretense of productivity and was pacing the main room, startling at every sound from outside. Mrs. Whitaker watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing until dinner time approached with no sign of the men's return. "They might be delayed by the weather," she offered as she began preparing the evening meal. "There were dark clouds to the south this morning." "Yes, perhaps," Penelope agreed, though her worry only increased. A snowstorm would make the journey home even more perilous. Night fell and still Finn did not return. Penelope sat by the front window, a lamp burning beside her, straining to see through the darkness. Mrs. Whitaker had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep was impossible for Penelope. It was well past midnight when she finally heard the sound of horses approaching. She rushed to the door, flinging it open to see 4 riders emerging from the darkness, their forms hunched against the cold. Relief flooded through her as she recognized Finn's broad shoulders, but it quickly turned to alarm when she saw he was supporting himself awkwardly in the saddle. As he dismounted, he stumbled, and 2 of the hands quickly moved to help him. "Finn." Penelope hurried down the steps, heedless of the cold. "What happened?" "Nothing serious," he assured her, though his face was pale beneath his tan. "Just a disagreement about the proper way to discuss business." "He was shot," Ryan said bluntly, helping Finn toward the house. "Walsh's foreman got off a lucky shot before we subdued him." "Shot?" Penelope felt faint. "Where? How bad is it?" "Just grazed my side," Finn said through gritted teeth. "Looks worse than it is." They brought him into the house and settled him in a chair by the fire. Penelope rushed to heat water while Ryan helped Finn remove his coat and shirt, revealing a bloody bandage wrapped around his torso. "Mrs. Whitaker keeps medical supplies in the pantry," Ryan told her. "Second shelf on the right." Penelope found the supplies: clean bandages, iodine, and a small bottle of laudanum. When she returned, Ryan had removed the makeshift bandage, exposing a nasty gash along Finn's ribs. "The bullet just caught him," Ryan explained. "If he'd been a few inches to the left." "But he wasn't," Penelope said firmly, unwilling to contemplate what might have happened. "Let me clean the wound." Ryan seemed surprised but stepped aside. "I'll check on the horses then. The men are putting them up." Once they were alone, Penelope knelt beside Finn and began gently cleaning the wound. He winced but remained silent as she worked. "You promised to be careful," she said quietly, focusing on the task to hide the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I was. Walsh's foreman wasn't." He watched her face as she applied the iodine. "You're good at this. Steady hands." "I used to help the doctor when he came to treat my mother," she explained, beginning to wrap the clean bandage around his torso. The intimacy of the moment, her hands against his bare skin, his breath warm against her hair as she leaned close, sent a flutter through her despite the seriousness of the situation. "What happened with Walsh?" she asked, securing the bandage. "We came to an understanding." "He denied stealing the bulls, of course, but he agreed to compensate us for our misplaced livestock and to respect our boundaries going forward." Finn grimaced as he shifted in the chair. His foreman was less diplomatic. "And now, will there be further trouble?" "I don't think so." Walsh seemed genuinely surprised by his foreman's actions, fired him on the spot. Penelope finished with the bandage and sat back on her heels. "You should take some laudanum for the pain." "I don't need it. Just help me upstairs. Sleep is what I need most." She assisted him to their bedroom, where he sat heavily on the edge of the bed. When he tried to remove his boots, he winced in pain. "Let me," she said, kneeling to pull them off as she had done during the snowstorm. This time, however, when she looked up, Finn's expression was different, more intense, more vulnerable. "Penelope," he said, his voice husky. "I thought of you today. When the bullet hit, I thought of you." Her heart skipped a beat. "Finn, no, let me finish our arrangement. It's been a good one. You've brought order to the ranch books, helped make the place run more efficiently." He paused, seeming to search for words. But that's not why I thought of you when I felt that bullet strike. I thought of you because the idea of not returning to you was unbearable." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, this became more than an arrangement for me." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Penelope O'Connor." Joy burst within her like a sunrise. "Oh, Finn, I love you too. I've been so afraid to admit it, even to myself, because I thought you still saw this as just a business agreement." He reached for her hand, pulling her up to sit beside him. "Never just business, not anymore." His gaze dropped to her lips. "May I kiss my wife properly?" At last, in answer, Penelope leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, mindful of his injury, but quickly deepened as months of unacknowledged longing found expression. Finn's arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and she melted against him, finally home in a way that had nothing to do with the ranch house around them. When they finally parted, both breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "I should have been shot weeks ago if this is the result," he murmured. She laughed softly. "Don't you dare joke about that. I was terrified when I saw you stumble from that horse. I'm sorry I frightened you." His expression grew serious. "Penelope, I want you to know I never expected this to happen when I proposed our arrangement. I thought we'd develop a partnership, a friendship perhaps, but I never dared hope for more." "Nor did I," she admitted. "I was just grateful for the escape you offered. But living here with you, seeing your kindness, your integrity, your dedication to this land and the people who depend on it, how could I not fall in love with you?" Finn's smile was tender as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "So, what happens now, Mrs. O'Connor? Do we renegotiate our arrangement?" "I think we already have," she replied, leaning in to kiss him once more. That night they slept in each other's arms for the first time, no barrier of pillows between them. And though Finn's injury prevented anything more than gentle embraces, Penelope had never felt more complete, more perfectly at peace, than she did in the circle of her husband's arms. The transformation of their marriage from arrangement to love changed everything and nothing. They still worked side by side, managing the ranch, Penelope maintaining the books, Finn overseeing the daily operations, but now there were stolen kisses in the office, lingering touches at the dinner table, and nights spent discovering each other with increasing passion as Finn's wound healed. Winter gradually loosened its grip on the land. March brought warmer days, melting snow, and preparations for the spring calving season. The ranch hummed with activity as the hands repaired winter damage and readied corrals for the new arrivals. One crisp morning, Penelope woke to find Finn already dressed and looking out their bedroom window, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What is it?" she asked, stretching lazily. He turned, smiling at the sight of her. "Just thinking that it's been almost 4 months since we married." "4 of the best months of my life," she said, holding out her hand to him. He came to sit beside her on the bed, taking her hand in his. "Mine too, but there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What's that?" "Would you like to have a proper wedding? A celebration with friends and family, a new ring, a dress you choose for yourself rather than whatever was at hand." He looked almost shy. "I know our first ceremony was hasty, born of necessity rather than choice. I want to give you the wedding you deserve." Penelope's heart swelled with love for this man who continually found new ways to show his devotion. "I would love that," she said softly. "But Finn, I have no family left to attend." "You have me," he replied. "And Mrs. Whitaker and Alina and Ryan and the Hands, they've all grown to care for you." He hesitated. "And I was thinking we might invite some people from Riverton as well. Show them what a success you've made of yourself." The idea of returning to Riverton as Finn's beloved wife rather than Thomas Keller's destitute daughter was undeniably appealing. Yes, she decided. Let's do it. When the spring work settles down a bit, Finn sealed the agreement with a kiss that quickly deepened, and it was some time before either of them left the bedroom that morning. Plans for their second wedding became a joyful focus as spring unfurled across the Montana landscape. They decided on a June date, when the wildflowers would be in bloom and the ranch work would hit a lull between calving and summer grazing. In May, Penelope made a trip to Helena with Alina to select fabric for a wedding dress. The territorial capital was larger and more sophisticated than Riverton, with shops offering the latest fashions from back east. She chose a rich ivory silk with lace trim, feeling only a little guilty at the extravagance. The ranch was prospering under their joint management, with the books showing a healthy profit from winter sales and promising projections for the summer market. "You deserve it, Senora," Alina assured her as they examined the luxurious fabric. "The master, he is so proud of you." Penelope smiled, thinking of Finn's face when she'd shown him the quarterly profit statement. "We make a good team." "More than a team," Alina said with a knowing smile. "A true marriage." The words warmed Penelope. It was true what had begun as an arrangement of necessity had blossomed into a partnership of equals, bound by deep love and mutual respect. When they returned from Helena, Finn was waiting on the porch, his face lighting up at the sight of her. 4 months of good meals and happiness had added a softness to her once too thin frame, and the Montana sun had given her skin a healthy glow that made her auburn hair seem even more vibrant. "Welcome home," he said, helping her down from the wagon. "I missed you." "It was only 3 days," she laughed, though she had missed him just as keenly. 3 days too many. He glanced at the packages Alina was unloading. "Did you find what you were looking for?" "Yes, and more besides. You'll see it all at the wedding." "I can hardly wait." He drew her close for a kiss that made Alina giggle and hurry inside with the packages. The following weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Invitations were sent to everyone at the ranch and select individuals in Riverton, including Reverend Miller, who had been kind to Penelope after her father's death, and even Mr. Henderson, the banker who had sold her house to Finn. "Are you sure about inviting Henderson?" Finn asked when she added his name to the list. "After how he treated you, he was just doing his job," Penelope replied. "Besides, if he hadn't sold you the house, we might never have met." Finn conceded the point with a kiss. "When you put it that way, perhaps we should make him the guest of honor." As June approached, the ranch took on a festive air. Mrs. Whitaker and Alina outdid themselves preparing food for the celebration, and the hands erected a large canvas pavilion near the house, where the ceremony and subsequent feast would be held. Penelope's dress, sewn by Alina's skilled hands, hung in the blue room that had become her private dressing area, though she now spent every night in Finn's arms. The day before the wedding, guests began to arrive from Riverton. Penelope was nervous about facing the townspeople again, but Finn stayed by her side, his hand a reassuring presence at the small of her back as they greeted each arrival. "Miss Keller, or I should say, Mrs. O'Connor," Reverend Miller said warmly as he dismounted from his wagon. "You're looking remarkably well." "Thank you, Reverend. It's good to see you again." She introduced Finn, who shook the Reverend's hand firmly. "You've got a fine spread here, Mr. O'Connor," the Reverend observed, looking around at the well-maintained buildings and fat cattle grazing in the nearby pastures. "And I hear it's been prospering even more under joint management." "Penelope has been a godsend," Finn replied, his arm slipping around her waist. The ranch wouldn't be half as successful without her. The genuine pride in his voice brought a flush to Penelope's cheeks and a knowing smile to the Reverend's face. Mr. Henderson arrived next, visibly uncomfortable as he offered his congratulations. "I must say, Mrs. O'Connor, you appear to have landed on your feet quite admirably." "Yes, Mr. Henderson, I have been very fortunate," she replied evenly. "Life has a way of taking unexpected turns." "Indeed it does." He cleared his throat. "I've brought something for you, a wedding gift of sorts, though perhaps it's more of a restitution." He handed her a small leather pouch. Inside, Penelope found several pieces of jewelry: her mother's pearl earrings, a cameo brooch, and a gold locket containing miniature portraits of her parents. "These were in your father's safety deposit box at the bank," Henderson explained. "By rights, they should have been sold to cover his debts, but—" He looked embarrassed. "I set them aside, thinking someday you might want them back." Penelope was speechless, tears welling in her eyes as she clutched the precious mementos. "That was kind of you, Mr. Henderson," Finn said, extending his hand to the banker. "We appreciate it more than you know." Henderson shook Finn's hand, then Penelope's. "I wish you both every happiness. You've clearly found it already." As the banker moved away to greet other guests, Penelope turned to Finn, still clutching the jewelry. "I never thought I'd see these again," she whispered. "Mother's pearls, I can wear them tomorrow." Finn smiled, wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "See, coming back to face Riverton wasn't so bad after all." "No," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. "Nothing is bad when I'm with you." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers across the ranch. Penelope spent the morning in the blue room with Alina, who helped her dress and arranged her hair in an elegant style adorned with tiny white flowers. "You look beautiful, Senora," Alina said, stepping back to admire her work. "Like a princess in the stories." Penelope hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The ivory silk dress highlighted her slender figure, while her mother's pearl earrings added a touch of elegant sentimentality. But it was the happiness radiating from her face that truly transformed her. Her eyes bright, her cheeks flushed with excitement, her smile radiant with joy. A knock at the door announced Mrs. Whittaker, who entered with uncharacteristic hesitation. "It's nearly time," she said, her usual brisk manner softened by the occasion. "You look lovely, Mrs. O'Connor." "Thank you, Mrs. Whittaker." On impulse, Penelope embraced the older woman for everything. To her surprise, Mrs. Whittaker returned the embrace. "You've been good for him," she said quietly. "For all of us." When Penelope descended the stairs, Jack Ryan was waiting at the bottom, dressed in his Sunday best, his usually weathered face freshly shaved. "The boss asked if I'd do the honor of escorting you," he explained, looking slightly uncomfortable in his formal clothes. "Seeing as your father isn't here to do it." Touched by Finn's thoughtfulness, Penelope took Ryan's offered arm. "I would be honored, Mr. Ryan." They emerged from the house to find the ranch transformed. The pavilion was decorated with wildflowers and ribbon, chairs arranged in neat rows, already filled with ranch hands and townspeople. At the far end stood Reverend Miller, and beside him, Finn. Her heart swelled at the sight of her husband. He wore a new black suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his face clean-shaven for the occasion. But it was his expression as he caught sight of her that took her breath away, a look of such pure love and wonder that she felt tears spring to her eyes. As Ryan walked her slowly down the makeshift aisle, Penelope was acutely aware of the guests watching: Mrs. Whittaker and Alina, the ranch hands who had become like family, the townspeople from Riverton who had once pitied her and now looked on with a mixture of surprise and admiration. But her eyes remained fixed on Finn, her true north. The man who had offered her a fortune and a name when she had nothing, and in doing so had given her everything. When they reached the front, Ryan placed her hand in Finn's with a gruff, "Take care of her, boss." "With my life," Finn promised, his eyes never leaving Penelope's. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sure, having already proven their commitment to each other through months of shared life. When Finn slipped a new gold band onto her finger to join her original simple ring, he murmured words meant only for her. "With all that I am and all that I have, I am yours." When Reverend Miller pronounced them husband and wife again, Finn's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the night to come and all the days that would follow. The guests erupted in cheers and applause, led enthusiastically by the ranch hands who had grown fond of their boss's bookish wife. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Tables groaned under the weight of Mrs. Whittaker's cooking, barrels of beer were tapped, and a fiddler from town provided lively music for dancing. Penelope moved from guest to guest, no longer the destitute daughter of Thomas Keller, but the confident, beloved wife of Finn O'Connor, co-manager of the successful Rocking F Ranch. As twilight deepened into night and lanterns were lit around the pavilion, Finn claimed her for a dance, drawing her close as the fiddler played a slow, romantic tune. "Are you happy, Mrs. O'Connor?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Completely," she assured him, melting into his embrace. "Are you?" "More than I ever imagined possible." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "When I offered you my name and fortune that day in Riverton, I thought I was being generous. I had no idea I was the one who would receive the greater gift." "And what was that?" "You," he said simply. "Your intelligence, your courage, your heart. You've made the ranch more profitable, yes, but more importantly, you've made it a home." Penelope rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you remember telling me about the Pacific Ocean, how it makes a person feel small but somehow free?" "I do." "That's how loving you feels," she said softly. "Vast and humbling and liberating all at once." Finn's arms tightened around her. "Someday I'll take you there, to the ocean. We'll stand on the shore together and watch the sun set over the water." "I'd like that." She smiled up at him. "But I'm in no hurry. Everything I need is right here." As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart or settle into the various accommodations arranged for them, Finn took Penelope's hand and led her away from the pavilion toward a small rise overlooking the ranch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the Montana sky. "I have a wedding gift for you," he said, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside, Penelope found a delicate gold chain with a pendant, a miniature compass made of gold and mother of pearl. "It's beautiful," she breathed as Finn fastened it around her neck. "I wanted to give you something that symbolized what you've been for me," he explained. "A true north, a guiding light. Before you came, the ranch was just land and cattle. Now it's a home, a future." Tears shimmered in Penelope's eyes as she touched the compass pendant. "I love it." "And I love you, Finn O'Connor. Thank you for taking a chance on a penniless girl with nothing to offer but determination." "You offered far more than you knew," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "And I plan to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how much that's worth." Under the vast Montana sky, Penelope and Finn sealed their renewed vows with a kiss that promised forever, a promise that had begun in desperation, but would endure through love. Epilogue: 5 years later, the autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of the Rocking F Ranch house, illuminating the cozy office where Penelope sat reviewing the quarterly accounts. At 31, she had grown into her role as co-owner of one of the most prosperous ranches in Montana Territory, with confidence and grace. The shy, desperate young woman who had accepted Finn's proposal out of necessity was barely recognizable in the capable woman she had become. The sound of laughter drew her attention to the window. In the yard below, Finn was teaching their 4-year-old son, Thomas, named for her father, to ride his pony. The boy's copper hair, so like her own, gleamed in the sun as he bounced excitedly in the small saddle, Finn's strong hands ensuring he wouldn't fall. Nearby, their 2-year-old daughter, Sarah, named for Finn's mother, toddled after them, supervised by Alina, who had married one of the ranch hands 2 years prior but still considered the O'Connor children partly her own to care for. Penelope's hand drifted to her still flat stomach, where their third child had just begun to make its presence known. She hadn't told Finn yet, planning to share the news that evening when they were alone. The rocking F had thrived under their joint management. The horse breeding program Finn had started was now renowned throughout the territory, and their cattle operation had expanded to include new bloodlines that produced hardier, more valuable stock. The modest ranch house had been expanded to include a proper office for Penelope, a nursery for the children, and additional rooms for the growing family. They had made the trip to San Francisco the previous year, fulfilling Finn's promise to show her the Pacific. Standing on the shore with his arms around her, watching the sunset paint the endless water with gold and crimson, Penelope had felt exactly as he described, small yet free, awed by the vastness but secure in the love that anchored her. A knock at the office door interrupted her reflections. Mrs. Whittaker entered, still formidable despite her advancing years. "A letter came from Riverton," she said, handing Penelope an envelope. "And Mr. Ryan says the new breeding stock will arrive tomorrow." "Thank you, Mrs. Whittaker." Penelope took the letter, recognizing Reverend Miller's handwriting. After the housekeeper departed, Penelope opened the letter to find an invitation to Riverton's 25th anniversary celebration. The town had grown significantly in recent years, thanks in part to the railroad spur that now connected it to the main line. The Rocking F did substantial business there, and the O'Connors were considered important citizens despite living outside the town limits. Penelope smiled, remembering how different her status had been when she left Riverton that November day so long ago. She had been destitute then, with nothing but debts and desperation. Now she was returning as a successful rancher's wife, a mother, a businesswoman in her own right. She set the invitation aside and returned to the window, watching as Finn scooped little Sarah up onto the pony in front of her brother. The sight of her husband with their children never failed to fill her heart with joy. His face, more weathered now from years working under the Montana sun, still lit up when he looked at her. His blue eyes still held the same tenderness and passion that had first kindled love within her. As if sensing her gaze, Finn looked up at the window and smiled, raising his hand in greeting. Penelope returned the gesture, thinking of how far they had come from that first meeting in her father's house. She had thought herself unlucky then, left with nothing but her father's debts. Now she knew it had been the beginning of her fortune, not the financial security Finn had offered, though that had saved her, but the love that had grown between them, the family they had created, the legacy they were building together. When evening came, and the children were tucked into bed, Penelope and Finn sat together on the porch swing, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in the comfortable intimacy of a love that had deepened with each passing year. "I received an invitation from Reverend Miller today," she told him. "Riverton is celebrating its 25th anniversary next month. You want to go?" Finn asked, his fingers playing idly with a strand of her hair. "I think so. It would be nice to show the children where I grew up." He nodded. "We could make a family trip of it. The hands can manage things here for a few days." Penelope smiled, thinking how different this visit would be from her last days in Riverton. "We've come a long way since you offered to share your fortune and name with a desperate girl with nothing." Finn turned to face her, his expression serious despite the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I didn't know then what I know now." "What's that?" "That what you brought to our marriage was worth far more than anything I offered you." He touched her cheek gently. "You turned a house into a home, a business into a legacy. You gave me children, purpose, joy." Penelope's heart swelled with love. "Speaking of children," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach, "we'll be adding to our family again next spring." Finn's eyes widened, then filled with such tenderness it brought tears to her own. "Truly," she nodded, and he gathered her into his arms, his kiss expressing all the love and gratitude words couldn't contain. When they finally parted, Finn kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I am the wealthiest man in Montana," he whispered. "Not because of land or cattle, but because I have you." "And I," Penelope replied, her voice full of the certainty that came from years of proven love, "am the most fortunate woman alive. Not because you shared your fortune and your name, but because you shared your heart." Under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the land that had witnessed their journey from arrangement to abiding love, Finn and Penelope O'Connor held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the courage that had allowed them to build a life more precious than either could have imagined on that November day when she had nothing but debts, and he offered everything that would truly matter.